So at the end of the last session, we were just crocheting back along our first row. We're now nearly at the end of the first row. So I'm just going to do the last few stitches. So this one looks like it's the last stitch. So it's the most obvious last stitch. But actually, this chain is our last stitch. So we need to go into the third chain. So we've got one, whether you can quite see that, I'm going to try and make it really clear. We've got one at the bottom here, 2 and 3, and that third one is where we need to try and go into. So one side of the V, depending on how loosely you chain, it'll be easier or harder. So that's the end of the top of my chain, and that's where my last stitch is going to go. Oops, I didn't yarn over before I started, so I'm going to have to do that again. Yarn over, back in, yarn over, pull through, yarn over, pull through, yarn over, pull through, and then you should have 36 stitches. 36 stitches. And this is where it gets a little bit more tricky, because we're now going to start working in the round. So we're going to do a slip stitch to join this piece to this piece. So remember, we don't use this chain because that is now just a turning chain. That is not a stitch. We only did 2 to make sure we don't have a gap. So this V here, the more obvious one, is the top of that stitch. So we insert our hook into there. We yarn over and pull through both loops. So we're now attached. We've now joined our work. At this stage, if you find it easier, I'm going to then do my 2 chains to start the next row, just to secure that. You can either now get a needle and sew this in to the bottom of that chain there, that loop there, or you can come back and do that later. It's completely up to you. I'm just going to carry on for now so that you don't have to wait around for me to do that. So then we're going to yarn over and go back into the same stitch. Yarn over, pull through, and we've done our first double crochet. And now it is as simple as just keep on going round. Round and round. So we would carry on going all the way round, and here is one I prepared earlier. So when you get towards the end of that row, so this is my last stitch of the row, I am now not going to go into this stitch here because that is the slip stitch from when we just joined. Instead, I'm going to slip stitch into the top of the first stitch, again ignoring that chain 2, 1, 2. I'm going into the top of the stitch there, and we slip stitch to join that round, and that is the round complete. So then we can chain 2 again, yarn over and insert, yarn over, pull through, yarn over, pull through, and we just carry on again all the way around till we get to this final stitch here, ignoring the slip stitch, and we slip stitch into the top of that stitch just there, and you just keep going until you get to the top. So when you get to the top, it will look a bit more like this, like you've gone all the way round and round, round and round, and you will be able to just about find where you have been doing your joins. It's a slightly thicker seam there, but it's less noticeable, I find, than if you chain 2 and count that as your first stitch. But it's completely up to you how you want to do it. So as I discussed with the swatches, if you want to just chain 2 and then instead of doing your first stitch into the first stitch, you can chain 2, count that as your first stitch, and then do your first double crochet into the second stitch. So that, I hope that makes some sense to you. Now we're going at the last row, and the way you know it's the last row is quite simple. You hold it up to your can and you just decide when you're ready to stop. So I decided that the row before wouldn't have quite taken me to the top, so I've gone for another row there. So it's completely up to you how tall you want to go. And then we're going to just do our slip stitch to join in the top of our first stitch of that row. And this time we're going to work in half double crochet, so I'm going to chain 1 just to secure that, and then I'm going to pull my yarn through a bit to loosen it off, make sure it's secure, while I pop it over the top of my tin can, because at this point I'm going to form a lip around the top of my tin can, so you want to just slip it over, neaten it out a bit at the bottom. We will come back and secure it at the bottom as well. But for now we're just going to focus on getting that top bit secure. And this is where we do our half double crochets. And we're going to do decreasing here. Just, excuse me. I'm going to pause the video here and start again with another video so that they're not too long and you can just come back to it when you want to, because this is the next stage. So this is the decrease stage and the next 2 parts will be decreased. So I'll pause it here and rejoin in the next video.